about some All right, it's 5. We're going to get started. This first part of the meeting, first we'll call the meeting to order. And approval of the agenda, please. This is for the special meeting.
So moved. I recommend we approve it.
What's interesting is, and I am curious, is all my, because at the heading it says education study session. And this is not a study session, this is in fact a special meeting. So I want to make sure that the notice that went out actually said special meeting.
Lisa, can somebody go get her? Elma? Thanks.
Hey James, would you mind grabbing Alma really quick? We need her. Thanks. Could you sit in your phone? Did the notice for the special meeting, because I'm looking at the agenda that I have in front of me, did that, because this says study session on the heading, did the, how did the notice?
Yes, the press release, yes.
And the notice that went out, it said special meeting?
Yes, special meeting.
Great, terrific, thank you very much. Alrighty then, let's go ahead and, meeting's called to order. Let's salute the flag, both the U.S. and the New Mexico, please.
I don't think we voted on the agenda, that we had a motion.
No,
and
I
a
know.
second.
We just
What?
got ahead of ourselves.
Oh, okay.
We're not ahead of ourselves, we're good.
No, you didn't actually say move for approval. All in favor, signify by saying
We're not approving the agenda yet, we just called to order, we're doing the pledge.
Okay.
I just noticed the heading and it threw me off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, I'm not hearing you folks back there, come on. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América, y a la república que representa
Salute the flag of the state of Mexico, the symbol of friendship among united cultures.
Saludo la bandera del Estado de México, los símbolos de la amistad mexicana. Alrighty, approval of the special meeting agenda.
Recommend we approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay. And any discussion at all? Hearing no discussion. For the record, we need to show that Board Member Price is not with us at this point. And so,
She'll be coming to that.
what? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. And so the first item on the agenda is the action item, consideration approval of Resolution 2017-18-13, authorizing the sale of $11 million of the Series 2018 Education Technology Notes and execution of the lease purchase arrangement. Superintendent.
Mr. President, members of the board, I would like to turn this over to our interim CFO, Richard Halford.
Well, good evening, everyone. And what you have before you is what Eric Kerrigan, who by now should be a familiar face, will cover today. And of course, to his right is Art Melendres from Modular Law Firm. He's another familiar face. And I'll go over what the two action items are today, the resolution, and then we'll have some things you'll have to sign, and then the update on the sale that occurred this morning.
So good evening, President, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia, Eric Harrigan with RBC Capital Markets. I have a brief presentation just to give you an update on the bond sale that occurred this morning. The JP Morgan and RW Baird went out into the market to sell $30 million of general obligation bonds and $11 million of education technology notes. A couple of things of important to note is that we had a rating call with Standard & Poor's. Standard & Poor's removed the negative outlook on the school district and has a stable outlook on the school district. The bonds also did have an under the enhanced Moody's rating, but not the underlying Moody's rating, as we talked about in prior meetings. The true interest cost on the general obligation bonds was 2.82%, and on the ETNs, the education technology notes, was 1.94%. Item of note, on the general obligation bonds, the bonds received a total of $65 million of orders for 30 million of bonds. In select maturities where we saw significant orders, we were able to reduce the rate by 1 to 2 basis points on those orders, specifically in years 2023, 2024, and I believe 2030. And on the education technology notes, the district received a total of 14.9 million of orders on the 3-year note. We have we've got the pricing summary as well as the debt service schedules, and as well as a market update. But I will pause there for any questions that the board has for me.
Any questions at this point, Ms. Noble?
Thank you. So when the orders exceed the amount, that indicates strong demand?
President Member Noble, that is correct. So when the underwriting team goes out to market the bonds, they received a total of 65 million. There was 30 million, and in some particular orders there was significant more demand than other orders. So for example, in some maturities they received the exact number of bonds that were maturing. In other maturities they received almost 3 times those orders. When they receive those large orders, because they have so many orders coming in, they're able to reduce the yield slightly, knowing that they're going to lose some investors, but at the end of the day be able to sell all 30 million of GO bonds.
Great, thank you.
Additional questions at this time? Mr. Garcia?
You had mentioned something about stable rating. Does that mean it's back to stable? Is that normal? Or is it exactly back where it was before the state actually took a hit?
That rating is back where it used to be before the state took a hit. So 2 years ago, Standard & Poor's took the district from stable to negative outlook due to the reverse in trend of the district's projected fund balance and the stabilization of the state. Standard & Poor's removed that negative outlook to stable.
So stable is actually the highest or best, or could it be better?
So stable is, it basically points in the direction of where the rating is going. If there's a negative outlook, S&P projects that there could be a potential downgrade coming in the future. With a stable outlook means that they don't anticipate that there will be any rating change over the next 12 to 18 to 24 months. A positive outlook would mean that there is positive pressure on the rating.
Thank you.
Additional? Or we're good for now? Great.
One final comment that I just wanted to make is that due to the structure of the bonds, investors do demand higher coupons than the actual yields, and because of that, they do pay a premium. That premium goes into the debt service fund and is used to retire debt. On the 2018 GO bonds, the district will receive $3.14 million of premium that will go into the debt service fund on the day of closing. And on the education technology notes, the district will receive $646,000 approximately, again, go into the debt service fund. With that, I will then turn it over to Art Melendres with the Module Law Firm to address the education technology note resolution.
Thank you. Mr. President, members of the board, superintendent, what I asked the superintendent to pass out is...
Will you bring this closer to your... thank you, Art.
What I asked the superintendent to pass out was the award resolution, and that document was provided to you within your packets earlier. Only thing I need to point out is that on page 4 of the document that we passed out, it has now the interest rates filled in, because at the time that we sent this, we hadn't had the sale. The rest of the document is exactly the same as was in your packet, but I just wanted to highlight that Now you have the full information, including the interest rates.
Terrific, thank you. Ms. Noble?
Are we liking this method of sale? Feeling good about it?
President Member Noble, I would say that it can be determined year by year. When there's significant demand for municipal bonds in the market, typically a competitive sale is your best route to go. In this particular case, we've seen, significant volatility in interest rates. We've seen tax reform occur, and we've also seen in the last, year and a half issues with, state ratings and pressures on school ratings. So, as the district goes to sell its next series of general obligation bonds and potential, education technology notes, at that time, market conditions may dictate a different method of sale.
Mr. Melendres?
I have
We're
nothing.
good. Okay.
I'm
No.
back to you guys, to the
I see the only
superintendent
change.
with the recommendation.
So the recommendation from staff is, and from,
To approve the sales.
okay. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion then to approve the sale. It's interesting the way this is laid out. Okay, to approve the sale of the district's 30 million Series 2018 GO bonds to J.P. Morgan and Robert W. Baird. Right? That's what we're approving? That sale?
We're approving the education technology for 11 million.
We're doing that first.
Yes.
Okay, that's why,
that's
because you said the sale, okay, it confused me. Got
Because
it.
they has to have a
No,
special
I understand. I
meeting.
take
I'm
that back
sorry.
then. Action item 2A, I'll make a motion then to approve the resolution authorizing the sale of the 11 million in 2018 ETN notes and the execution of the lease purchase agreement. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Vice President Cashman. Additional conversation, concerns, comments? None? Let's go ahead and, just because of the nature of that this is the ETN and it's been volatile over the years, we're going to do this as a roll call. So Vice President Cashman? Yes. Secretary Garcia?
Yes.
Member Noble?
Yes.
President Carrillo votes yes. It passes unanimously. And now I understand we're going to have the update on, well, we got, or Cardi, I had the update. Right. So that's why I was confused a little bit there. Okay.
So, Mr. President, Eric Harrigan just rolled those together with the update and
It's
the
totally
whole
cool.
thing.
That's great. And we're right on schedule. It's 5:13. So what we have to do procedurally, we're going to adjourn this meeting and then come back in for the study session.
I believe we need some signatures.
It
Well, we can do all that, yeah. But we don't,
won't take long.
no, that's
I'll
cool.
be in and out.
All right. So we're going to do all that. We're going to adjourn this meeting then, and we'll be reconvening for the study session 5:15 or shortly thereafter.
Yes, Pedro, this was done at 5:13, 5:13, yeah. I've got them.
All righty, calling the meeting to order, the study session. And we've already done the pledge and the salute to the New Mexican flag just a few minutes ago, so we're not going to do it a second time. For approval of the agenda,
Recommend we approve the agenda?
I'll second. Oh, you second? Seconded by Kate Noble. And all those, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed, let the record show for the study session that Member Price is not with us. The next item, but before we get there, is board announcements. I have a question. No, I'll ask the question later. Okay, item 2, board announcements. Oh, well, that's us, board announcements. You guys have anything?
You just threw me.
Look right at you.
Mr. President, I guess the people I've been talking to out there, we actually got some really good feedback in regarding to the dress code, so that was actually good news.
I'll second that. I got a number of emails where people said, so is the dress code that there's basically no dress code, just don't be lewd or rude or, wear shirts with horrible things on them? And I said, yeah. And they were and some parents, when I went to dinner the other night, they said they have 3 kids in public schools. They were thrilled they're not having to buy 2 sets of clothes. And so a lot of happy people out there on this one. Any other board announcements? All righty. Let's introduce Alma. I don't know where I am tonight. Introduce our interpreter for this evening.
Good evening, Superintendent, board members, audience. My name is Alma Bejar. I will be doing the translation services in Spanish. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Alma Bejar. Si gustan traducción en español, voy a estar hacia atrás. Gracias.
So if anyone needs a language in addition to Spanish, Alma can do that too. So any more board announcements? Seeing none, Superintendent Garcia.
I have no announcement.
All righty. Board, any update or follow-up on things you... Why am I just... Here, you do it. Anybody signed up for public forum this evening?
Board member, President Carrillo, there are no speakers signed up tonight.
They're missing out. It's school safety recommendations. Okay. And is there, looking at, there are no members from the public tonight. So where? Well, I think of him as family, think of him as part of the district. I don't know, given the topic, I would have thought some folks would have been here. So, Superintendent.
Board update and follow-up, no superintendent update and follow-up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, then I'll have the question that I was going to ask.
Okay.
And I'm concerned because there is nobody here. This is a hot topic all around the nation, and there's no one here. And so I'm wondering, did the district take any steps, either a robocall or a district-wide email or something, to let the public know that we were having this presentation this evening?
Mr. President, members of the board, we follow our normal protocol that we do for all board meetings. We never really highlight a particular agenda item, so the short answer is no.
Okay, and I know that because Mr. Knott, and I see you here tonight, Terry, which is great, Mr. Knott was off, so.
No, but there was coverage because.
But there was nothing in the Monday. You know, on the Monday,
yeah.
It says that there's a board meeting and what's going to be happening.
But
Okay.
we have, we did meet with, we had a briefing like we do with the media. And
Right.
we had met with the New Mexican, and then there was also a call also around SROs. And then, of course, the Terry Last is here.
Okay, swell. So President, next item is item 7, presentation discussion. Item A, and the only item tonight is the school safety recommendations.
So thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, members of the audience, media. I want to make real clear when we get to the recommendation section, they're really recommendations for discussion. And we did prioritize them, and we'll talk about that later, but I wanted to be very clear about that we're not saying this is what we're going to do, because there's some on there that I don't know if the board's even interested in.
Okay.
There's some we clearly are not recommending, or we're making that very clear based on research and data. So our...
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted the procedure that we've been following that seems to be working well. Let's just wait to the end, write the slide number down, and then we'll do questions. Is that okay with the group? Great.
And we really
Thank you.
appreciate that. So this evening, our presenter and myself, Mario Salvidres, is our Director of Safety and Security, and we're very fortunate to have him on board. And guess we'll just go ahead and get started. Some of these slides we're going to go over somewhat quickly because we've already discussed it before. And it could be that, we already had a board meeting on this topic, and we shared the information from the forums and where we were at. And I think we did have people come to those meetings. So it could be that they feel like they probably know where we stand on most of these issues. And it could be that's why also we don't have people here tonight. But regardless, there's the info on the forums. I'm not going to read that to you. Let's go to the next slide. This we've also presented to you where we aggregated, I'm sorry, see, you've got me started. Now I don't know where I'm at. This is basically the overview of the presentation tonight. So general questions, concerns, and suggestions. These two slides are categorizations. What we did as Adelphi, we took all of the recs and then said, what categories do they fall under from all the meetings, talking to the kids, etc. So these are the things that people hit, from multiple points of entry, fencing, security of older buildings, police presence, first aid kits, active shooter training. I'm going to bounce over to mechanical devices like metal-proof detectors, bulletproof devices, products, alarm systems, cameras. All of that we put under mechanical devices. Next slide. Tracking social media, training students, staff, protocols, community forums with law enforcement, involve parents and families in keeping schools safe, don't increase work of loads of social workers. I think they were talking about our current ones. So those were just sort of the general topics, and I think we've talked about that before too, which is why I'm trying to not rehash the old stuff, and so we have more time to focus on the new stuff. So Mr. Salvidres is going to talk about, it says select Santa Fe Public Schools current safety and security measures. There are many more that we have in place, and we both want to thank the board and Gabe Romero, our former Director of Safety and Security. I told this to the media. I feel the Santa Fe Public Schools is really way ahead of the game when we compare to other districts where they are in all of the layers of security that we have. So Mr. Salvidres will hit some of these.
President Carrillo, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Garcia, thank you very much. And just to echo what Dr. Garcia said, I've been handed over an excellent foundation for the security of the schools that Mr. Romero has done. At this point, what we're doing is looking at what we have. So keeping in mind some of those general concerns and recommendations that Dr. Garcia just mentioned, I'm going to go over some of the items that we already do in the district, which will answer some of the concerns already that exist. And then we'll continue forward with some of the other particular items that were specifically recommended for the district. So as we go through these items here, each school conducts at least 13 drills for safety purposes, from fire drills to lockdowns to shelters in place and so forth, and off-site evacuations. There's a yearly unannounced safety audits for each school. Perimeter fencing, single point of entries, we have that throughout the school system. Staff monitoring arrival and dismissal times. Visitor management program, Raptor, which began installation May of 2018, and we're expanding on that currently. Vestibules, double entry systems, the RhinoWare door hardware, which that one began installation June of 2018, and I conducted inspection of approximately 6 schools this morning that I already have it in there, in the schools. We have electric access controls, intercoms for visitor screening, such as at Atalaya, Asecamar, excuse me, which doesn't have a vestibule or double entry system. We have threat assessment protocols. We support the See Something, Say Something, which is an initiative back from Department of Homeland Security that started back in 2011.
Mr. Salvidres, on the threat assessment protocol, that's children who might, because of their behavior, could be a threat to themselves or to others. And so we have a protocol on how those kids are assessed.
That's correct. We have first aid kits in the classrooms. We have lockdown buckets in the classrooms, security guards.
Do you want to tell them what the lockdown buckets are?
Absolutely.
Or I think we get to it later, don't we?
I have a visual presentation about just they can look at it. But the lockdown bucket simply is this: if you're stuck in a room because of a situation, whether it's caused in the school or surrounding the school, and we put you in shelter, place, or lockdown, children and staff are still going to have needs, and it's the way that they can go in and relieve themselves, and we have an option for them if there is locked in the room for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, etc. So that bucket is in place. It has specific items inside that they can utilize. It can then be sealed and cleaned up at a later date, but it gives them an option instead of, unfortunately, unhealthily, some child having to, hold in their needs for an extended amount of time. Obviously, the first aid kits are just general first aid kits, which we'd like to explore expanding those into a trauma.
And we also
kit.
have something, don't we? I don't know if you're aware of it, or maybe Mr. Romero. Don't we also have like provisions also? So I think there's also like snacks, like bars, energy bars, and water, and that sort of thing.
So in our grab bags, which is a
Grab bags, yeah, I
red
confused
backpack
them.
that's there,
Mhm.
there are some candy, some snacks, and other items, a blanket, so forth, that the teacher or staff member may need for the student that when they're in these rooms, or when they've had to evacuate the building itself. Continuing forward, we have security guards, we have panic buttons in the office, traffic safety equipment, security cameras, security radios. We require faculty and staff to wear picture IDs. We require high school students to have picture IDs. We have emergency guide flip charts that the staff can use. Good working relationship with law enforcement, first responders. And with that, for those who aren't aware, when I was at the police department, we bought an intelligence center was begun. What that is, it can monitor social media. So basically, it can put it's geofencing, but we call it a bubble, around a particular site, and tell this program monitor specific words such as bomb, gun, etc. And it will alert the detectives to that particular type of communication on social media and bring up the person who's looking, so they can go ahead and explore further into what is the meaning behind it or the intent behind that particular statement on social media. So that's already in place, which is a great benefit because that's the way our children today communicate, is through social media. We have PED approved safety plans, and we have communication protocols when there is an emergency, who gets notified. The next slide is an illustration of basically what I spoke about now. That's a lockdown bucket in the middle. On the left-hand side, you can see an access control. This is to the far right top. That's the great work that Mr. Romero has done, is by setting up the layers, which is setting up the site layer, which is security fencing. The next layer being the building or exterior locking the doors with the access controls. And the last one being the interior, which is where the staff is a primary operator or participant in it, to ensure that if the first two layers have been breached, we have staff now who are going to detect and hopefully deter bad people from coming into our schools in a friendly way, of course, by simply asking an individual who may not have a visitor's tag or an school ID that they may have missed the office and signed in, and direct them in that direction. So it's basically called target hardening, making it difficult for a bad person to penetrate our schools and consider it as the next place to victimize. The next thing, Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, so we also feel that it's important, to have all of these other pieces in place, but again, we've talked a lot about prevention, and it's been a big discussion by the board, for sure. So again, the threat assessment, Sue O'Brien works with the schools on identifying, assessing, and managing individuals and groups who may pose a threat of targeted violence to themselves or others. You all have invested in the PACS Good Behavior Game process, and we're adding 6 new schools that will be trained in August of 2018. We're looking at expanding consistent positive behavior supports to middle and high schools. And so the SYNC is working with her team as they work with the schools. The Santa Fe Public Schools Safe Zones program, training counselors, nurses, and volunteer staff to be identifiable, inclusive, and safe adults for students to seek support from. Second step is an evidence-based prevention curriculum for pre-K through 6 that focuses on violence prevention, conflict resolution, problem solving, critical thinking, bullying prevention. And then you put in the budget increasing the master social work response team. So, you know, if everything goes right and you all decide you want to go that way, there's no change. We are looking at adding 5 social workers. What's interesting, what I didn't put on this, I had a conversation recently with April Miller from the Sky Center, and she was telling me that their request for services has skyrocketed, and she was very happy to see that we're looking at also augmenting our support to students, because the need has increased. And if you saw recently, after those celebrity deaths, the statistic came out from the CDC that since the 90s, suicide has skyrocketed, you know, by 30%, and it is a significant problem in New Mexico, has been and continues to be. So the need for social worker support and behavioral and mental health, I think, continues to be a priority.
So the question always is how do we stand against other school districts that are similar to us? What are they doing that we're not doing? What are the best practices do they have that we don't have? Well, I went ahead and contacted a few of the schools within our district, one specifically because they have a particular item I'll discuss later more about. So Artesia has cameras, door access controls, and Eagle gunshot detection system, which I'll discuss a little bit more, and they have SROs. Rio Rancho has cameras, also door access controls, SROs, and Las Cruces has, it seems like they put their bulk of security into the SRO programs because that is where they're really strong. They have the lockdown buttons, audible notifications, security guards, but they're lacking now the bottom side, which that's why I highlighted it somewhere where we're really strong, which is they're working on cameras, they're working on keyless entry, and they're working on the outside fencing. So that's why I think they really focused on SROs and depended on them most of for their security purposes. So one of the items that was brought up specifically, and I thought it was prudent to go ahead and look into it and give not just my opinion, but the opinion of the industry and other experts on this, is the metal detectors, which are discussed regularly during after-school violence. So some of the benefits of a metal detector, well, first and foremost, I should go back. I think the slide says a lot, metal detectors when a school seems like a prison, because if you look at it, it's set up as more related to TSA. You walk through the metal detector and somebody's going to still have to search your bag, so there's that big process of getting a child through the front door to begin with. So some of the benefits, it gives administrative personnel the chance to screen out weapons. That's something we really don't have, so that is a benefit. It can detect weapons. It is a visual discouragement to violence, so if a bad person sees it, maybe they'll be discouraged and go elsewhere instead. It may provide a comfortable learning environment because some students may feel safer because the item is in place. But some of the disadvantages on the
Just
same...
wanted to point out that the board, Ruth, for some reason, doesn't have the disadvantages page in their book. Do you have slide 10?
It is 10.
Okay, so my pages are different.
So, Dr. Garcia, disadvantages are actually notes.
Oh, are they in the comments?
They're notes.
Okay,
They're not a
I'm
slide.
sorry. All right, so go ahead.
Yes. So some of the disadvantages
My bad.
on there that exist is not all weapons are detected by metal detectors. There are weapons out there made out of wood,
Bless you.
PVC piping, et cetera, and other types of items. They can also be costly to install, and they're high recommended that they are monitored or staffed by an armed guard or SRO. That makes it a little bit difficult. Now, an additional component to this is how do you secure a school such as Santa Fe High School for a single point of entry or double point of entry and ensure that no one else gets into that school with any other way other than going through a metal detector. Logistically, I think it'd be a nightmare to go in and try to set that up in that particular school. It might be easier in smaller schools, but that would be the very daunting task to try to solve that problem there.
We have an issue of cost, and I think those other examples that you had, we might want to share. In 2013, a 14-year-old in Atlanta was shot inside a school that used metal detectors. Administrators admitted the machine, I guess, was not working. An off-duty armed resource officer at their school was able to grab the gun, but In Minnesota, with the metal detector guards and fencing, was the site of a mass shooting in 2005 that left 7 people killed. There are so many ways to breach metal detectors when you look at the cost, but I just wanted to point those two.
Certainly. And we'll get to the cost in another slide. And this slide here, I'd like you guys to kind of focus the board to this slide, because this kind of speaks into having to change the culture of schools and arrival times. If we look at what is a -5, which you'll see towards the bottom of the bar chart there, that's 5 minutes before the start of school. If you have a school of approximately 2,000 students, 5 minutes before the start of school, you're looking at 1,355 students that still need to walk through that metal detector and be cleared to attend school. That's not my study, that's the Criminal Justice Reference Service study who has said that. So it goes up if you add addition, they call it portals, which is another metal detector. Obviously the number goes down. But you look at the really big number, which was impressive to me. 10 minutes after the start of class, there's still 1,350 students that need to go through that metal detector because of the screening process. So is that cohesive to a good learning environment? And how many parents are going to be willing to change their routine to get their children to school almost 30 minutes early just to get them to class on time? Now, if we move over, see the cost of these items. So a portable metal detector, the price can range from $1,000 up to $30,000, but a moderately priced one is $4,000 to $5,000. A 15-year study, a research that it's called Impacts of Metal Detectors Used in School. This was their statement. It says there is insufficient data to determine whether the presence of metal detectors in schools reduces the risk of violent behavior among students, and some research suggests that the presence of metal detectors may detrimentally impact student perceptions of safety. Therefore, what I say, there's not enough time that has lapsed or data that we can say that is an option that we should go with. Move on to the next item that was brought forward. I'd like you to really focus on the red blanket looking items with the kids kneeling down, and I'm going to make a point that is a false sense of safety and security. So this item is a bulletproof blanket and backpacks. The key item here, which Dr. Garcia will speak to it a little bit later, but I'll bring it up a little earlier, bulletproof. There's no such thing as a bulletproof. There is bullet resistant. With these type of items, there's a specific type of training that goes into using blankets. It is made for giving you cover for a short period of time until you find better cover. It is not for you to kneel down or crouch down and such and stay there, because that is not the intended way a bullet-resistant blanket is supposed to be used. SWAT members use it, and it's the same thing. It's temporary cover until you find better cover. Now, these items, as they give you this false sense of safety and security, what isn't really known too much to the public is that if it does succeed in stopping a particular type of weapon or projectile, the penetration into the blanket or the product into the person is approximately 2 inches still. So it won't break the skin necessarily, but the impact that it takes and the velocity it goes through and the time and what it needs to stop that energy, you will still have a penetration into your body of approximately 2 inches. 2 inches on the head of a person is a lot. 2 inches at the chest is a lot. That can cause some severe damage or it could be fatal as well. So the misconception of bulletproof, I like for everybody to remove it. In the police profession, we never say bulletproof because it's bullet resistant. It resists only so much. So the cost of these items, blankets can run between $1,000 and they have to be distributed during an emergency. So that doesn't mean that the child carries it around with them or the student. Backpacks can range from $200 to $500. Now the backpack is smaller than the blanket, so hopefully we're hoping it only protects the vital organs or other items. So again, misleading again. With this, some of the care and lifespan of these material, it's recommended it's replaced every 5 years. Storage-wise, it should not be exposed to sunlight or liquids, and when it's stored, it should be flat because that maintains the integrity of the fabric. Now, me having a 9-year-old, to have her do this, it's not going to happen. So I just, it's a interesting product.
Before you move on, and we could go on and on with all of the products that have come out, you know, there's like these little, they almost look like a tornado or cyclone shelter that they build, and you go into the floor and hide. I mean, the only reason that we're mentioning these was that some people at our forums, and Ms. Cashman, you were there, I think, where they were like vehemently recommending that we look at all of these, so we did. And, you know, just to look at them, look at what the costs were, and then be able to explain why we didn't. Again, just doing our due diligence.
So the next slide, I'll get into a little more specifics to give you a better picture of what we're looking at. These are other items that are considered to be bullet resistant. The advertisement for these particular items, it says it protects from handgun fire. All right, so what that says, it doesn't protect against assault rifle fire. So assault rifle normally is used as a .223 round or a 5.56 round. So how or what protects against that? It's usually a ceramic or a steel plate. The weight of these type of items, which normally can range from 3.25 pounds to 7.5 pounds for the regular size of 10 by 12 inch, which is what normally is used in the SWAT team. Those, depending on the manufacturer and what they use, is, like I said, 3.25 pounds, 7.5 pounds. Now, to put in perspective, because they offer a kind of a shield, so a 20 inch by 40 inch could weigh between 14 to 33 pounds for it to successfully stop at least one round of a .223 or 5.56. Well, I don't know how many students and teachers can be hauling around 33 pounds of a shield trying to protect children. So again, it's not necessarily the best product out there for our school. Our best option, I should say, it's a product, but not maybe the best option for our schools at this time. We want to, school resource officers, now I know this topic was discussed in length amongst yourselves, and right now obviously there's no funding for it. There's the NMSIA requirement and mandate for the policy to be in place to identify who carries, where the gun is, where the weapon is at, if it's not on the person who's authorized to carry, and what are the protocols of reporting, et cetera. And we haven't established that, but that's not necessarily just this school system. My understanding, there's not a single school system in the state of New Mexico who has yet adopted a policy that identifies this, and that's according to Mr. Zamora, who presented that for us. So there's a lot that goes into place into this, and that is also finding the correct police officer from our local police department, from our sheriff's department, if we ever ventured in there. That would be the correct officer in our schools. We want an officer who promotes safety, who becomes a mentor, not just to the students, but to the staff, and who's not always looking for filing charges against our children who make mistakes, and instead is looking for alternate routes to correct their path, their chosen path at that time.
I also want to be clear, I was interviewed actually 3 reporters, 2 from one paper, 1 from another, on this issue. And I did make it very clear that I'm not even sure where the board is, because I don't think we've ever taken a vote or know if there's unanimity on this issue. But the biggest roadblock is you have to work with a police department, and if they don't have the staffing or the funding, I mean, you can't even really go forward. It's just sort of a academic discussion.
So the next item is specific to the Eagle system, and we're only looking into it because it was brought up specifically in one of the forums. We're not promoting it. We're not saying anything we should go with it or not at this moment. But we're going to discuss what it is, and this is the gunshot detection lockdown system. So it uses what was developed by what they say is Department of Energy, which analyzes waveform and energy, and can identify the caliber of weapon being shot, first of all, the location it has discharged in, and the direction of the aggressor or the shooter is going. Now, the direction of the aggressor or the shooter going is only achievable if this person continues to shoot, because it continues to identify where the shots are at. This system is, what it claims to do is it ties into your access control, so you can lock down your school immediately. It can tie into your video surveillance camera systems. It provides automatic notification to law enforcement, automatic video feed of where the bad guy is, and is supposed to do this automatically without any assistance or oversight from a person, a human. It claims to have a 0 false reading, which you guys can make your own determination about 0 false readings on any particular system. One school which is using this particular system, which I spoke to specifically, was Artesia Public Schools. They went ahead and piloted it, eventually went ahead and bought it for one of their schools. They bought it for Yeso, which is an elementary school with approximately 500 students. They have had 100% success because they haven't had a shooting, but they also have not had any false alarms with the system. The assistant superintendent likes the system, and they're possibly going to move into additional systems for their school. Now, their school is a smaller district than ours, right? I just received, and it's not in this packet, because I just received the email from Eagle to see what it would cost for us in comparison to theirs. So for Tusuka Elementary School, to set up a system like this is $70,000. For Salazar Elementary School, it's $86,000. So I was scared to ask about Santa Fe High and Capital because I can only imagine what the cost would be for their schools, but we can definitely find out just to have an idea.
And we all also want to see, how did it work at Aztec? Of course, if you don't have a bullet, I mean, I guess they could shoot one just to see what would happen, right? But we've talked about it, that there are other, right? There are other things that could go wrong with this and create other problems that are unintended consequences. So it's not something that we would recommend jumping onto right away until we've seen more use of this in other places.
Well, one of the concerns Mr. Romero brought up is what if the shooter's already indoors and this system locks down the building, but just locked out law enforcement as well. So the system would be great if the shooter was outside and detected him before he came in. I'll be attending on Thursday a live shoot. They're going to shoot from a .22 caliber to a 5.56 caliber demonstration with Eagle in Albuquerque. It's an undisclosed location that they're going to go and demonstrate this. And we'll wait and see how it works. The international zone for Albuquerque, they're going to try it out outdoors where they have their problems to see how it works for them. So if
And
once
not the schools, that's the police department, right?
that is the schools, yes.
Oh, it is
I'm
the
sorry, that's the
schools? It's
that's the police department is going
Yeah,
to try
not the
that out
schools.
in the outdoors, and we're just doing the demonstration. So we'll see once all the data comes in where it sits, and what kind of recommendations they have for it as well. Moving on to the next thing was a concern was brought up or suggesting that we had bulletproof windows and doors you can see out of, but not in. So we already spoke about the bulletproof concept. Some of the options that we have out there is we can use rebar for these windows, but then again we start looking more like a prison. We have windows that you can see out of, or you cannot see out of. You can let light in, but you can't see in either. So that kind of defeats the purpose that you see a bad person or a bad perpetrator walking up to your school. And there's also a company, and multiple companies, that create a film that they claim to be bullet resistant as well. Now, bullet resistant again for handguns perhaps, but for an assault rifle not. What it does help out with, and the next slide will also add that benefit, so when you do have some type of film and somebody shoots through a window or tries to break a window, the window remains normally intact. So it makes it difficult, much more difficult for a person to continue through that window because they have to continue breaking and trying to eventually create a hole in that window to go through instead of just shattering and falling forward and then being able to walk through. So this slide here demonstrates an option that some of the schools are using, which is decorative window film, which such as Capital can put the Jaguars in their front windows if they wish. What it does give you that added protection of when somebody shoots that window, it'll maintain the window upright, I guess, not necessarily the integrity. It'll shatter, but it won't fall through. So the bad person will continue to have to either shoot or use a different item to bust through that window. This was an answer to some of the parents wanting their children to participate in some type of training of the run, hide, and fight, which is the active shooter response training. Myself and Mr. Romero brainstormed a bit. I remembered that when I was at the police department and creating this training for multiple agencies and businesses, that I had found a video from a particular school who had actually done a very good job of coming up with a training video for the children, age appropriate. And when the video starts, I want you to pay close attention to how the instructor speaks to the children. The instructor isn't talking down to the children. It comes down to the level of the child and asks the child to tell them what they think it is. What is this particular type of action that we're taking? So we'll let the video play for a bit.
We're going to talk today about some important stuff. You know how we practice at school? We practice math and we practice reading to get better at it. Well, there's some other things we practice at school too to get better at, and that's staying safe, things that help us stay safe. What are some of the things that we do to stay safe at school?
We practice fire drills.
We practice fire drills, yes, we practice them a lot in case there's a real fire. And what do we do when we're practicing?
Normally we run outside and go to the field.
Do we run outside?
No, we walk.
We walk outside, right? What are some other drills that we do at school to stay safe? Maddie?
A lockdown drill.
We do lockdown drills. That's another way that we stay safe. And in what case might we do a lockdown drill?
If a stranger is in the building or if he's outside the building.
Okay, so if there's an unknown person or a stranger in the building, we might have a lockdown drill. How do we know if it's a stranger and not just somebody's mom here to help us?
If they're wearing like a visitor's badge or they have like one of your badges, or like a volunteer badge, then you know that they're a good guy.
You can be pretty sure that that person is a good guy, right? If they have one of those things on, that helps identify them as a good guy. And what about a bad guy then? How would we know if a person is a bad guy?
If they didn't have one of the badges on.
Okay, so right away, if they don't have one of those things, if you've never seen them before and they just look out of place.
Maybe if you see like a gun pocket where to hold your guns or just weapons.
You might even see a weapon. Can we always tell if a person is a bad guy?
No.
Not always, but usually we're going to look for one of those things. What happens if you see someone that looks like they don't belong here? That's a stranger.
So that was just an example of how she does a wonderful job talking to kids. And they have one for middle school and high school. And we were thinking we can go ahead and produce that with our own students here, with our own staff members that we select, and it can be relatively not cost-free, but low cost for us to go and produce that. And in speaking to how would we deploy this, I spoke to my daughter before she graduated, and I guess they have a counseling session or a period where they meet with their counselors.
Advisory period. Mm-hmm.
And she said, we always meet with them. I said, perfect. That would be an excellent time that they can play this video, get questions and answers for a session where a student who's more curious of what to do. But the ultimate message would be, regardless of what happens, you listen to your teacher or your staff member first, because they have gotten more training this video is giving them.
What we like about tailoring, and of course we would work with Sue O'Brien's shop and, with our folks in Linda's shop, with, principals, to tailor this in an age-appropriate way that, because we know that a lot of active shooter training can be very traumatic, and that's not what we want to do. On the other hand, we also believe that some of the things that would be talked about are applicable to our kids when they're out in the community, because we know things have happened in malls, in theaters, in concerts, churches, and so knowing this run, hide, fight, and how do you manage that could be helpful. There could also be an opt-out if parents didn't want to. They could preview it in advance. But we think that this is something that has been requested quite a bit at our forums by parents, asking us why aren't we doing this? We do it with the adults, but why aren't we doing it with kids? So this is just one thought. Of course, we'd want to know how you all felt about it. Keep going.
Okay, so we're 2/3 through, so bear with me. The next one is the fatal funnel, which we consider the fatal funnel. In doing the safety audits, I learned that a lot of teachers did not know where to position children or students during a lockdown situation. In the forums as well, some of the students said they didn't know the teachers didn't know where to put them. some of the teachers were placing them directly in front of the doorway, which is the wrong place to be. What I suggested is we spend some time at each school, get some of the staff with me, and some of my staff with them, and we go into a couple of classrooms that are challenging and help them identify what is the safest place for students to be in a lockdown situation, and identify what is considered the fatal funnel. The fatal funnel is an area where a person who has bad intentions, who's going to shoot somebody, has the ability to reach its target from the doorway. Whether the doorway open or closed, they can successfully hit their target.
We probably wouldn't call it the fatal funnel, but we would call it something else like the safe zone, where to be.
We can come up with the new terminology. This is the terminology being used in the industry, in the professional world. That is what it's referred to. So that's something that we can do. I've already started that with some of the schools, and meeting with the principal and going out during our safety audit to meet with some of the teachers and asking them. And they have been using, such as when there's earthquakes, get underneath the desk, which was the wrong answer to the lockdown. And I do believe the district may benefit from this. So these are some of the additional safety recommendations, which would also answer some of the concerns that were brought forward, the general concerns. This system here, this product here there are out there in the industry. It's a mobile safety app. It's fast, reliable mass notification system. So what this answers is a lot of teachers and parents say, well, we don't know what's going on. We get put into a shelter in place or a lockdown, and there's no communication. Well, they might get a robocall. So before I get into the entire system, the slide on the left-hand side as we're looking at is something that's already in place that these type of systems work with. Our Regional Emergency Communication Center already uses the Smart 911 system, which everybody here can create an account and then put in there critical information about your family, yourself, loved ones if they have some type of disability. So when you call 911, they already know that because it comes up. So these systems interact with that particular type of system. So the system on the right-hand side is something such as this. It takes about 1.5 seconds for that particular icon to be activated. So if a teacher or staff member at a school holds down the active shooter button, it will automatically notify law enforcement, but automatically also send a message to everybody on that system and tell them where they're at. So if this was happening at Santa Fe High School, all the teachers who were on this particular system will immediately be notified that this is happening. Now, what it continues to do is allows the superintendent or anyone else to now have continuous communication, just like text, but it won't just be received by one person. Everybody will be getting that notification immediately. So when law enforcement says, they can reply back by text and say, I received your alert. I have police on the way. Everybody got that. Or police have arrived on scene. Everybody knows police have arrived on scene. Or if it's something like a wild animal, a dangerous animal on campus, and that's what we want to tell them, you're on lockdown because of this. It's not an active shooter. Everybody knows immediately. So this is just a way to go ahead and communicate with them, satisfy that anxiety that exists when we're in a lockdown or shelter in place. This continued slide just continues to explain a little bit more. It works on mobile phones, smartphones, I should say. It works on laptops and desktops as well. So it has a multi-platform possibility for notification with it. The cost for such a system can range between $30,000 or $45,000, which is a reoccurring cost, depending on the size of the district, and also a one-time setup fee of approximately $10,000, depending on the company you go with. This particular slide here is labeled as a draft because Dr. Garcia stepped out, but NEA, the unions, we still needed to talk with them, have them see if they agree to this particular language. So some of the concerns from the students is that some of the teachers or staff members were not taking these drills seriously. And that's kind of unique when the students are telling us this. So how to encourage that drills are serious, have to be taken seriously in the event of something bad that does happen. We know what to do. And this was one of the options that was come forward. It was a staff acknowledgement and agreement, which simply states they acknowledge and agree to participate in all required safety training and drills, follow all safety protocols with fidelity, ask my principal or district personnel to help and clarification if I don't understand any of the requirements or protocols. That encourages people to just come forward and say, I'm not comfortable or confident right now. to say I can follow through with the safety drill that exists, help me a little bit more, and I'm more than happy to do so till they feel confident that they at least have the general foundation to respond when an emergency does arise. I was being long-winded intentionally, ma'am.
We obviously would have to work with our bargaining group with NEA, you know, because it is a little bit in that realm of terms of conditions of employment. But what we heard from students is that, and we heard it at both high schools, that sometimes, I mean, I think for the most part, teachers do follow all of this stuff, but that there were some instances where either the teachers didn't know the protocol, maybe they didn't have the training, or they just chose not to do it. And so what this does is just puts people on alert that they are required to participate, to follow the protocols, or to ask for help if they don't understand them.
Okay. The next slide identifies the state requirement drills that we do currently. We do 9 fire drills, 2 shelters in place, 1 lockdown, 1 off-site evacuation, which leads up to your 13 drills that you do a year. I would recommend to the superintendent yourselves is that we continue obviously with the 9 fire drills. We do the 2 shelters in place, but we change one of those shelters in place to be conducted between classes or during lunch. We do that 1 lockdown, which is standard when we normally do it. We add 2 more lockdowns, again conducted between classes or lunch. That answers the concern or satisfies the concern from some of the students that were asking, I don't know what to do when in between classes or I'm out at lunch. What it also does, it identifies our vulnerability, right? Our vulnerability is, in my view, is if we have a lockdown situation at Santa Fe High School or Capitol High School and it's during lunch, how are we going to get all those kids back into the school? And is the school the safest place to bring back those kids to begin with? And how do we notify them that we're going into a shelter in place or a lockdown? We may create additional concerns that we have, but we may have to find some solutions on how to resolve those concerns that may exist. And I think this is a good start. The first time that they do it, it's going to be chaos. The second time that they do it, they're going to have some answers to their chaos. They're going to hone in a little bit better. Hopefully by the third time, they're much more comfortable. Not perfected it, but they're much more comfortable on what they're doing during a scenario like this. This is one of the items I like to explore, which follows up with the drills during changing period and recess or lunch, which is we don't have any type of audible or visual alarm when we go into a lockdown or a shelter in place. If you all think anywhere you go, if you see a blue flashing light, that represents security. That's a concern for something might be going on. So an option of this is having some type of audible alarm that's unique, doesn't sound anything like a fire alarm, and a different type of visual alarm, maybe a blue light, that if you are in the parking lot and you start seeing this blue light go off, you know your school is at minimum going into a shelter in place. So that student, that staff member can move to a safe location. So when can it be used? Between classes, during lunch, recess. Who can also benefit? Some of the hearing impaired. We have families who are hearing impaired, parents who come in who may not hear this intercom announcement of we need to go in shelter or place or lockdown. But if they identify and we put it out there and say, when you see this blue light or you see this type of audible alarm, this is what it means. You're visiting. Put yourself in a safe location, because most of those rooms are going to be locked down. So that's still in the exploratory phase, and exploratory because we haven't had necessarily a vendor yet. I haven't been able to identify a vendor with the cost associated to implementing such a program. One item that we already have in our grab bags is we have the red and green cards, which identify a red card identifies I don't have all my students accounted for. Green card says everybody I'm supposed to be in charge of or responsible for is accounted for. I like to expand the use of that red and green card. And how we expand that use of the red and green card is the green card would indicate that there is no hostiles in that room. So when it's safe to do so and we start moving to the lifting the lockdown, when it's safe to do so, you either place the green card under the door or up against the window, wherever you can. The green card will show first responders or whoever's there, there's no harm in here. There's no hostiles. Nobody needs immediate emergency attention. The red card, in turn, would identify to staff, to first responders, somebody in this room is hurt and needs first responder here much quicker. So that way it expedites the process of getting EMS or whoever to that particular room. And that's something that's basically just a procedure, because we already have this in place in the grab bags. So it'd be just expanding on it.
This page, this is a study session, so it's less formal, so hopefully we can engage in a discussion in the Q&A. Once we get a sense from you, if there's some items that you want to actually vote on at some point in time, we can bring back formal recommendations. This is really more for discussion on the things that we think are worthwhile exploring, not necessarily that we're recommending that there's school resource officers or that we have an audible alarm system. I just want to make that clear. So on the not recommended, let's do those first, and I think you've already hit why those won't work. Those are all the mechanical things of that nature, the metal detectors, the bullet resistant items, and then the bulletproof windows. If we were to actually have true bulletproof windows in working with general services and with law enforcement, and from their experience, the depth of what the windows would require wouldn't even fit in a window frame. We'd have to totally remodel to be able to accommodate, retrofit, to be able to do something like that. The cost would be significant. And so I think there's just a real misnomer out there around bulletproof versus bullet resistant. And again, bullet resistant primarily to handguns, probably not to an automatic or assault rifle. On the recommended side, we started with order of importance. And we looked at, of course, behavioral and mental health, which we've attempted to address, whether we're talking about positive behavior supports or we're talking about I just lost it, PACS, or other kinds of behavioral programs. We do want to continue with the robocalls. Those have been effective it was very helpful in stopping the false alarm or posting inappropriately on social media. That pretty much stopped, but there's something that I think is important. I hope the media covers this, and I hope that the public is aware of it. We're going to make a real attempt to make sure that people are aware of the FBI's Think Before You Post, because if a kid were to call or to write a note like, I'm going to shoot up the school, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, it will be a 4th-degree felony. It's not just that, we're going to discipline you and report you over to the authorities. Teenagers, you don't want a felony on your record. And so we want to make sure that we focus on that. And I'll have Mr. Salvidres finish the rest of these.
So in order of reports, we went through all of them, which is another thing is expanding the yearly drills. Student video would be great. I think it'd be a real benefit for the students. Answers a lot of questions that they may have already. Identify and designate safest places to hide in classrooms. The green and red cards are no cost really to move forward with those. Staff acknowledgement and agreement, which is still in draft procedure. We will look at increasing number of security guards.
So if we look at 9 through 13, I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut in real quick. 9 through 13 obviously would require adjustments to the budget. It would have to be if the board wanted to go that way. And we're not necessarily recommending that. But the issue has come up that we have security guards at middle and high school, some coverage at elementary. But I know that there's been some board members that have said, well, what about the elementary schools and why don't we? So obviously, if that became a priority, maybe not for next year, some of this might be future planning. If the resources were there, that might be something that you would want to look at. The same with the resource officers. I'm not sure where the board is. There's some real pros to it. A lot of the students at the high schools felt like it would be good, but there are negatives on that. And then those last 3 really would require more vetting, right, Mr. Salvidres?
That is correct.
We're not ready, but I think they are not something that we would say is totally ridiculous, such as, say, the metal detector in terms of cost and feasibility and actual efficacy. but they're worth exploring. So that's where we are with those, and you have a closing quote, I think, on this slide.
Absolutely. So, as the industry has recognized how much money has been put into safety and security for schools, there's been a number of different products coming forward. So Heather Schwartz, who has studied safety and technology for RA&D Corporation, has said this. This is not coming from me. Research into what actually works is really thin. There's not a lot of evidence to help districts sort through the pile before investing in costly systems. So that's why we are trying to capitalize on the low-hanging fruit that exists. We have good systems in place. How can we hone in and perfect them?
And again, on the preventative side, on the behavioral health, we think is really important. So we're ready to stand for questions or discussion.
So first, anyone else have like a headache from this? In a way, first off, I'd like to say thank you very much. I think it was an excellent presentation. And I know, I mean, I didn't eye roll too much, I don't think visibly, but in my head, my eyes were rolling a lot. And, but it was an excellent presentation. And Superintendent, thank you very much for bringing all the information together from the public and into a way that could be very easily understood by the board. So relative to questions and things, I'm going to go first, if that's okay. Is that okay, Rudy? So the thing I really love, we'll start with, it'll be like a multi-layered sandwich, where you always start with the things and then you do the bad thing, right? You want a sandwich because of, anyway, I think the video is an excellent idea. We're already doing the behavioral robocalls. People ignore them too much. I think texting system is great, but the video, well produced, I think can really nail it, can be geared toward a lot of the different age groups. And that's the way people receive information these days anyway, so I think a video can be really good. So obviously, people that know me know that first and foremost, I believe that what's happening in our country is that school safety is becoming the issue, and it isn't the issue. It just isn't. And people that think it is are wrong. Our schools are safe, okay? And just like the quote you said, you know, we could do every one of these things, and a guy can come in off Zia Road through the back way into the student parking lot, or come the back way where the field is at, you know, Capitol. There's just so many. When somebody's intent on doing harm, they're intent on doing harm. You know, when they want to break into your house, they're going to break into your house. They're going to take what they want, and they're going to leave. The question is whether or not anyone's going to get injured in the process, and things like that. And so, for me, the real issue is will always be the lackadaisical attitude that this country has towards possession, sale, transfer of firearms. So on page 6, the vestibule, I know that we're upgrading all of our properties. Every time we do an upgrade, we're including vestibule and security. So panic buttons in the office. So in the office at each school, there's a panic button? Like even whether it's Carlos Gilbert or whether it's Salazar or...
Mr. Romero, do you also want to help, since you're also at security and also with maintenance facilities? And I don't know, maybe you already have the answer to that.
You can always just get, I love short answers.
Yes. President, board members, yes.
Okay. Okay. I just have a note here on board. It's not a policy, but I know that when I came on the board, it was a board norm that we were required to wear our board IDs anytime we were on a campus, right? I hope we're all doing that. Okay. On page 9, curious about Las Cruces, 11 SROs. What did they use as site distribution? How do they decide where the SROs go?
President Carrillo.
Because they have 2 major high schools, right? Centennial and Las Cruces, don't they?
And Mayfield.
Yeah, okay.
President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Dr. Garcia, they basically have SROs almost at every school. They rotate some of them during the elementaries. That was their initiative, is they moved forward really heavy on the SROs. That's where they assigned a sergeant to supervise them. So the middle schools, high schools have them. The elementaries share them, and they rotate them around.
Interesting.
And they also just recently, I think I may have sent you all an article, but I think Las Cruces also just from their cash balance hired a bunch of new security guards too.
Wow. On the same subject, Rudy?
So what is the cost that the Las Cruces district pays for the SROs, do you know?
President Carrillo, board member, I am not familiar with the cost. I did not get in that deep with them.
Well, it's probably what it would be up here in terms of being like, you consider, let's say they're making $45,000, $50,000 a year plus their benefit load. It's going to be 75 to 80,000 per SRO, and then to administrate them.
And they'd have to work with their police department.
Right.
And, you know, because you have to have a peace officer. You can't just hire your own police.
President Carrillo, actually, I apologize for one thing here. I do recall one thing during the discussion. They actually don't pay for the regular cost of the police officer. They cover all the overtime and training for that particular officer. So the police department actually absorbs the cost of the staff member itself, the FTE.
So that's why we probably need to be a city initiative as well.
Right.
Okay.
So I totally understand how it works and what's happening, but I'm just wondering, like in Albuquerque, where the off-duty police officer is allowed to use his unit as well as his firearm as well as his bulletproof vest to go work kind of as a part-time job. So have we looked into that?
But the Albuquerque Public Schools is totally different. They have a police department that has been certified by the state of New Mexico. They're the only school district that has a police department.
Where I guess where I'm trying to go with this, I'd like to see the school district actually try to work something out with the city police, possibly sheriffs and I know the superintendent has actually been talking with the mayor, and it's all about they don't have the budget, which I certainly understand that. But we have to be creative, both the city and the school as well as the county, on how can we do this? You know, there has to be some other way to say, no, we don't have the money, we're done, see you.
Yeah,
Talk to us when we have. So I'd just like to see you, and you're doing an excellent job, both of you gentlemen, and so we can actually somehow figure out just to be a little bit more creative.
President Carrillo, board member Garcia, Superintendent Garcia, there's actually an answer for that already. $68 an hour is what the police department charges if you want them as an overtime. That hasn't changed since I was there, and it still continues today. So I believe Acting Chief Padilla has mentioned that in another forum. It's $68 an hour, the cost if you want them here.
But they've also said that they don't recommend that because then their people get burnt out, they're tired. And so, you know, I think, and Mr. Carrillo met with me with the mayor. I know that, you know, I mean, and I agree with you. I'm looking for grants. I'd love to be creative, but you have to have someone to partner with you on that. But yet, don't know if the Board of Education, you all have not really taken a vote on that of whether or not, because I've heard different things from you. And so as a board, collectively, I don't know if this is something that you really want to pursue.
Is it on SROs? And then what I'd like to do is go off of SROs, because SROs can be their own study session.
So at the school board law conference this past weekend, they did have a session on Saturday on funding for SROs. They recommended two different types of approaches to fund them, is to go to your city, your county, and say, we have 12,000 students, so many staff, we are taxpayers. Are you going to tell us that you are not going to protect your citizens, not ours, your citizens? And they said, and you hold the mayor or the county, whatever, accountable. Okay, so that was their first approach, and they said school boards should not be having to fund it. It's a responsibility of the police to fund. The other suggestion that they made for SROs is that you could maybe work with your county or your city and say, we would allow to have a police substation on our property. So then they're not really doing SRO jobs, but you have a police presence. And so they said that's what some of the rural school districts are doing, saying have a police substation there on our campus. We'll give the land and maybe we have a building. So those were two suggestions on SROs from a briefing on Saturday.
Interesting. Okay. Page, well, I think you ruled this stuff out anyway, things with like page at the back. I mean, sorry, these blankets and these backpacks and all this stuff to me is just silly. But I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are investing lots of money in companies that are just laughing all the way to the bank. Because you can see all of our kids with their books. Looks at the books, or then, and even though they have their Chromebooks too, there's still lots of books and their 35-pound thing in their backpack that only covers their back, and they're silly.
Just not to dismiss that, I mean, at one of the forums that we went to, the point is, if you get into a lockdown situation, you have an armed shooter, you take your backpack, you put that on the front of you to protect your chest. And so some parents they say, my child's life is worth, it's priceless. So
Parents can go ahead and do that
but
at, $299 a pop or whatever. I mean, I'm sorry, silly is the word that I have to use. The blanket's like duck and cover. All you young kids don't remember duck and cover, but us older folks do. Yes, Ms. Noble.
Just on that point, it's very common when you have something like this, and having been a business reporter for a long time, that you see a lot of products come out when there's a groundswell of public concern or an issue. And the good news is they will get better, and as time goes on, we may see if there are products that become worthwhile or tested, and I appreciate the looking into the costs and the efficacy and if any of them have been tested in the field. But this, to me, is just, it's what happens, particularly in a capitalist, product-oriented society.
Yeah. On the SROs, so page 17, I would like us to have a study session on that, maybe sooner rather than later in August, because we really should make a decision on SROs as a board. If we decide to do it, that's great, then we can really push that we want SROs, and then we can start building this partnership with the city to get this done. I agree with you, Ms. Cashman, completely. These kids are citizens of the city of Santa Fe. City of Santa Fe should be footing the bill. And I know that the thing that comes up all the time, and I completely disagree with Dr. Garcia on this, as it being an academic discussion, I don't think it is at all, because we've heard the police department say we can't even find police officers. But I would bet anything that if we were to look nationally, we could find SROs, people that like working with high school kids and middle school kids that would want to come to Santa Fe to do that specific job. They don't want to have a beat. They want to be at a school, because that's a real special person, that wants to have those high school relationships and things. So I don't want to let the SROs be held up by this idea that we can't even hire a number of officers that we need. The ridiculous Eagle gunshot thing, glad Artesia's got all that money to throw away. I think Santa Fe High School would have to be like $500,000. Given if Artesia, that was like whatever it was, a 500 student elementary, you look at a school like Santa Fe High School with all the buildings and a campus, even when we condense it, it's just going to be $500,000. That is absolute insanity. Actually, I think all of this is pretty much insanity. But so I love the idea of the video talking about active shooter, what you can do in the classroom to flip your desk when you find your tunnel of death, and what area is the safe area.
Sir, fatal tunnel, please.
The what?
Fatal tunnel.
I know it's the fatal tunnel or the fatal funnel, but we'll just call it the spray, because that's what you're looking at, right? Where can you spray from the door? And so it's probably these two corners that are closest to the door, but in the corners. Okay. Fatal funnel. Who comes up with this stuff? And I know it wasn't you, and this is not a commentary on you at all. I like the idea of an app, because it wasn't, when that thing happened at Santa Fe High School, my son he called me, I called Veronica, and even before she'd gotten the news from the district, because that's how quick the kids are with their apps. I mean, I think that's a great idea, so, and then everyone knows, okay, this is active shooter, or this is wild dog, or the governor's here with the PED secretary, whatever that, right? Okay, that's just, I know you can't. Okay, on the, I don't understand on page 24 why this would be recurring.
Which one?
Page 24, the app. I could see the cost of setup, cost of implementation, but where would the recurring, I could see there being some little maintenance, but why would that be recurring?
President Carrillo, board members, Dr. Garcia. That
Is
is
it
the-
licensing? Is
That's
that-
the licensing, that is what the vendor told me,
got it.
so that's
Okay.
what it is.
That, just, the licensing piece just
Yes.
clicked in my brain. On 25, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Garcia.
Also, I think that's actually a great idea, and I understand where the cost could actually be recurring year after year. It's just like our deputies, they actually have to have storage for their units, their cameras in their units, as well as their body cameras. So there is a cost for reoccurring, because obviously we need to store that data somewhere, right? But I think it's a very good idea to spend $45,000 on some sort of an app like that for somebody's life. That's nothing.
And it would
So I
seem
think that's a
as-
great idea.
It would seem as well, and then Ms. Cashman, that you could then communicate with students with that app, right? Say, you know, the offender is in the north wing, or move to the south wing to get out. I mean, it could be used that way too, right?
President Carrillo, board members, Dr. Garcia, there's a second component called the Guardian. So you can send very sensitive messages to staff only, and then particular messages to students, because you don't necessarily want to traumatize a student with what you're having to tell staff.
Right.
And you don't want the student necessarily knowing what the police has notified staff, but you can separate that communication, send it to staff and parents, this only, and then staff, this information.
Well, and you don't want the perpetrator to know.
Correct.
It's like in the movies when you get the walkie-talkie of the police and you have the bad guys, like you know where they're going. Ms. Cashman?
I was just going to say on this app, though, the cost that you're giving us is for 3,000 people or 2,000 people. It's not for all of our students to
No
have
staff.
that information. So it's a very limited group of people that would have this information. So I just want to point.
On page 25, while I would want the union to buy into any acknowledgement or agreement, I don't believe we need their approval. We do have rights as management. We are management. And there are certain things we can do with or without the approval of the union. I would think they'd be on board here, but we are management, and we have the right, we have the sole right to run the managerial side of the district. Yes, Ms. Cashman?
And I would say that the lawyers disagree with you on that. They said
Labor
that
law doesn't disagree on that.
Well, at the law conference, they were, first of all, they said because we could be changing the workplace environment, we have to, they said the best approach is to go to the union in a cooperative manner and say, we need everyone to be participating. So that's the first, and because it's safety, they said most of the people. However, they have had cases that people say, this is very traumatic to me as a staff member. And so then they gave a whole range of options, and I know that Ms. Sullivan was there at that same, so she could probably give all those things to Dr. Garcia, but they said there is a process, and if you just go and impose it, you know, you're opening yourself up to a lot of issues, that the best approach is to first go to the union, say because of this, we like it, and I like that approach too, to first start with the union, say, because it concerned me that we would have any staff member say, I'm not participating in the training or the drills. And they said they are seeing cases of that, and so we do need to negotiate.
No, we want
that.
them to be our partner, absolutely. But when push comes to shove, you manage the district. So, and I totally support us taking that on.
Well, they would say if that was, once we get it in place, because we do have some things that we need to do with the union, then that becomes a condition of employment. So, but we're already got employees, and now we're trying to change the rules on them, so.
Okay, on page 27, the light intercom thing, that sounded interesting to me. You have it way down on the list, so, but just the idea that if someone saw a blue flashing light, they would know what was going on if they were, for instance, at lunch or
And
coming in the
and
student
it's
parking
low
lot.
on the list because of investigating.
Yeah, that's
vetting
fine.
it.
Okay. Also, let's see, on 29, what did I write down? No, we're good. So then, for me personally, it doesn't matter how, I'm not sure how other people feel. I don't like the use of the minions. I can't stand those little cartoon characters. And if I never saw another minion again, it would be okay with me. You have kids, you probably love the minions, Kate. I've always thought they were just rude little creatures with really bad habits, setting horrible examples for our kids. But that's just me on minions. I think the main issue is not school safety. I've said that all along. I think the main issue is there was 20 people in this room at one time. If we're spending an hour on this, that's 20 hours. If we had 20 hours spent lobbying our legislature to have sensible gun legislation, that makes times all the districts in the state, that would make a really big difference. And I'll continue to believe that school safety is not the issue, but that it's around the access to guns. So, who's next? Mr. Garcia.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very good, both of you guys. I've actually been involved in one of the drills that Mr. Romero had outside. He did a very excellent job. In regards to page 6, the 13 drills that we have. 6.
Page.
So it's my understanding that, and I know I understand the state's recommendation where we have to have one active shooter or one full lockdown that the state requires, but that's not at every school, right? It is at every school? So every Capitol High School Santa Fe has one mandatory lockdown? Because
Mr. Garcia, and it's something I was surprised that Mr. Carrillo skipped over that, but that's one that I would like to bring back as a policy, so that we have a little more backup to, enforce this, because the fire drills, and I hope that at some point the state will change the requirements. Kids have a lot of experience with fire drills, and we're pretty good at that. The shelter in place and the lockdown, which we're recommending, exceeds state requirement, but that's one that I would like to bring back to the board as a policy rec. So I think it would give us a little more teeth. And therefore, in asking, when we go back to the staff requirement, if there's a policy that we're going to have these, then you have to practice, or how are you going to know how to do this? And so then it goes back to the management rights, and again, working with the union, and Ms. Sullivan did share this with us in cabinet. We had a pretty much in-depth discussion on it. But, and we don't want to over-practice, because then the kids don't take it seriously either, so finding that right balance. But we do intend to bring something of this nature back to you.
On that specific subject, is yours too? I would just want to say that I'd want teachers to comply, and if they didn't comply, I'd want their principals in the buildings to write them up. It's just too important to let people, wickily-dickily do their way. Ms. Noble and then Ms. Cashman.
Thank you. I just wanted to say this was a slide I really appreciated, and I really appreciate that it's been sort of thought through, maybe with the prompting of some of our students, but that we do it between classes or at lunch, and that we do it a couple times because the practice will work, and it does seem like a good policy to bring forward. The other thing I was thinking, 9 fire drills seems like a lot, given that buildings are all sprinklered these days. And I realize it's the state requirement, but we could also send a letter at the time of adopting the policy saying we might suggest a change or something like that. It's for you to think about, Superintendent.
Well, I think it's something, Mr. President,
Yes,
if I may respond. I think it's something that's worthwhile talking to our legislature to see if they would propose some changes to the statute to get this more timely of what's happening now in society, that the fire drills are important, but we're in a whole different era, and so I agree.
So just on that note,
Well, Ms.
so is it?
Cashman was on that note too, so then Ms. Cashman, Mr. Garcia.
Just for a matter of historical reference, at the school board conference, I believe they said that the last time a child died in a fire in a school was in 1959.
Let's say 1908, when they're all made out of wood. So, the state requirement, is that actually state statute, or that's the secretary's recommended statute?
And it's actually ties to the fire code, and the fire marshal enforces it, just like you have to have your doors locked, and there's all kinds of, unlocked rather, all kinds of things of that nature.
Huh.
So, whenever we do our lockdown or shelter in place, how are the educators actually taught what to do? Because I understand what Board President Carrillo is saying, but is there any way to get some sort of, because the educators are already doing a hard enough job as it is, and so is there any way to actually get them some sort of stipend pay, or how does that work? No, or do they get a certificate, or how does that work in regards to?
So how have we done it in the past, Mr. Romero?
Superintendent Garcia, Board President, board members, in the past, we've provided guidance in the way of the flip chart that's on the wall, through procedures, both the district safety plan and the school safety plan that instruct them what to do, and then through practicing the drills and going out on site to teach them what to do. There's also a video that I think that was being implemented for new people onboarding that went through the lockdown, the shelter-in-place, and the evacuation drills. That fell off. I think that's something that we should probably look at reinstituting. But there's been a number of ways we've reached out to teachers. Pretty simple, basic steps. The principal or the site administrator is the leader there that should be training the staff on how to do that. To have individual training for teachers, I don't know if that's necessary, but maybe it's something we should look at.
In terms of not individual training, if I may, on that point, but for example, like a fire drill, the principal, and they go over it and they time it and they explain to the teachers which door they're supposed to go out through. They practice it, and so we want to make sure that they practice these others. I also feel that the shelter in place and lockdown, we should define it for new employees, but to me it's abstract. Like and then I wasn't here the day they did it, but I was like, I don't know what we do in this building. If something were to happen in this building, what do we do? What do they do at BF Young? What do you do at these other places? And so, I understand how this works, but until you practice it in your own site, you don't know exactly what to do. So it really comes down to doing it. I know that after all of this was brought to our attention, when there was a lot of, after Parkland in particular, I know the high school principals spent a lot of time, right, Ms. Wilson-Segura? They spent a lot of time with their high school staffs going over it. But this is where we got from the kids that they feel like some people still don't know. So I think we're going to have to go back and look at it and refine and talk to our principals, because they're the ones on the ground that can give us good guidance also about what they think is the best way to practice. Maybe we also have a training video that people see during a staff meeting. So most of it can be conducted on staff, Mr. Garcia, where I don't think we would necessarily have to provide a stipend.
So if something unfortunately happens, does the schools actually have an emergency command center? As to who's the key person that is funneling out all this information?
Mr. Garcia, I would prefer to discuss that with you privately. Okay. I don't really want to speak publicly about that, just to maintain our own security, but we have protocols on that as well, and we can monitor quite effectively.
Ms. Cashman? So
on lockdown drills, one of the things at the law conference again, which I thought was a good suggestion, they said now with lockdowns, if you're in a lockdown situation and the fire alarm goes off, we should be instructing our staff, do not respond to that, and our kids, we are not responding to that fire alarm, because that's a way. And so I don't know if that's what we want to do as a district, but we need to have that discussion. So once we're in the lockdown, and make sure we know, instead of exiting out and then you're, if created
There's the funnel of death, huh?
Yeah.
Page 16. I actually went to a conference roughly about 8 months ago in Dallas. It was a huge security camera conference. And that's one of the newest things that is out. They're actually putting in parks these days they have a little microphone or whatnot. If there's a gunshot that actually goes off in that park, they can tell whether it's a gunshot, or they can tell, supposedly, you can tell whether it's a gunshot or whether it's actually a firework of some sort. And then it actually deploys the city police or the school emergency force out there and lets them know that there's something happening right now. So I think that's a really good up and coming technology. Let's see here. Back to that one. And in regards to the because of the lawsuit that's happening, is the lockdown buckets? Is there a curtain that comes with those lockdown buckets? Some sort of a curtain that?
Privacy curtain, so if somebody's got a...
No, President Carrillo, Board Member Garcia, Superintendent Garcia, there is none. There is no curtain necessarily, but I mean, obviously they use their good judgment, creating the most comfortable.
They can use one of those blankets, right?
They can use,
Those
they have
bulletproof
blankets in there, they have
to shield.
cubbies, they have different things. I mean, this is a dynamic situation. And the last thing is about them they're relieving themselves in front of the students when somebody's trying to hurt them. You know that, but yeah, I'm sure the common sense is used by the teachers of where the student can relieve themselves.
Maybe throw a blanket in there so they can hold it, so for privacy. Ms. Cashman?
I would say, having been a former teacher and at the elementary level, what some of the teachers do is they just keep the 3 poster board displays. So you just put it around, you find a little corner, and then you've covered, you know, the child so they're not, and makes them feel more comfortable. And so that's an easy solution to that.
Regards to the video, I thought the video was very good. I think we should pursue that. I was just wondering how come it only had 161,000 hits on it. It's kind of, you would hope that it would have a lot more hits on it. Let's see, page 24. And that's it. Thank you for your presentation.
Or anything right now? Me and then Ms. Cashman. By the end of this meeting, I'd like us to, if we could, the 4 of us agree to just direct superintendent and staff to pursue the video. I mean, I think that's low-hanging fruit, something that could even probably be ready for August to show, and, well, maybe not. It's middle of June, but you know what I mean. Ms. Cashman.
On page 7, I'm familiar with the card, the emergency management guide we have for administrators in the classrooms. But what I am concerned about, how are we updating our substitutes? So, I mean, we update, you know, at the beginning of the year, school sites have their staff, a staff meeting and that, but unless it's a long-term sub, is not a member of those staffs. So they come in and then all of a sudden, you know, a lot of times they say, nobody's ever trained me. And I know it's hard because we can have a substitute that subs for 2 times in a year and some that are constantly, but we need to be making sure that when they come in to our buildings, they know what to do. And that's not, it hasn't in the past been the case. So how are we going to take care of our substitutes?
Mr. President, very carefully. No, we actually are looking at all of our training. I think we have identified some holes in that or where we can improve. And I think we have to also look at how we include substitutes in that protocol. Hopefully, if our students also are geared up, you know, it's the same thing like for a fire drill. The kids automatically know what to do, and sometimes they lead. It's exactly, it becomes a reflex.
Mr. Garcia? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Cashman. Was it on that point, Rudy? Okay. Oh, right, I get it.
On slide 15, if just, again, came out at the law conference, if we decide to have school resource officers, that also needs to be negotiated with the union because we're changing the condition of employment because now we have guns on the campus.
Okay.
So I'm just trying
I know that.
to
okay, but I
put us, you know,
on
so
that
we
on that point.
understand that.
Okay, and my background is I did a lot of union work before I came to Santa Fe on the union side, right? So, and I know that, I mean, they always, at law conference and everything else, it's always err on the side of absolutely not getting sued. But there's very specific case law around where we have the right to manage the district and they have the right to look out for the well-being of the workers, whether it's a district or a workplace, whatever it is. And our wanting to have SROs, I mean, you could say that if we want to install air conditioning in some of the schools, that's changing the workplace, so you have to negotiate that with the union. That's completely not the case. And you can take all of that so far that you cripple any organization's ability to adapt to a changing marketplace or workplace or district or school situation. So, I mean, I know what they say, and I've, gone to those too, and I would just be very reticent to throw everything under the workplace condition bus, because it'll cripple the district to be able to operate.
But I would also say we do need to, having guns on campus is very different than having air conditioning in your classroom. So we need to be careful.
The point was workplace conditions.
And one of the things which I don't think there's any appetite on this school board, but there were some other school boards that are thinking of arming teachers, and they said that definitely needs to be negotiated with the union, because, some people will choose that this is not a place where they want to work with a teacher or now you have a different requirement. And so, but I don't think that's anything the school board is going, but they were and there are some districts have gone ahead and they are going to do it, but they're smaller districts and they say, we don't have a union, so we're doing it. But just something for us as a board to not get ourselves into trouble.
There's something funny I'm trying to look up here on my phone. A friend of mine sent me this thing of when you arming teachers in districts. So you have a certain kind of gun for the gym, and it was a squirt gun. You have a certain kind of a gun, but it was all these different guns for all these different teachers depending on what they taught. It was done obviously very tongue-in-cheek. Couldn't find it fast enough, but it's probably on.
What would the biology teacher's gun look like?
Like maybe a big syringe. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. I'd have to bring it up again. It was very funny. And
it may be funny, but I don't think we want to make light of. There is a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of unknown.
But our students said there wasn't. Our students, when and Gabe, you were there, and Mr. Salvadorius, you were there. Our students did not say they were afraid in school. When we had the representative group of all of the different grades, there's these issues that we're discussing that are, I mean, it's terrible we're having to have these discussions. But they said they weren't afraid in their school. And, no more afraid than they might be going to the plaza or a concert or a movie theater. I mean, there are people out there, many people, I could go out to a restaurant tonight. It doesn't matter that the sign says because they serve liquor you can't carry firearms. Somebody could be packing.
But all that I'm saying is there is a level of fear. How much there is, we don't know. And it's not just fear from our students. It's fear from our staff. It's fear from our parents. So there is a level of fear. On slide number 20, I want to talk about this one a little bit because I was concerned with what the students were going to say, this run, hide, and fight. And I just want to talk about it a little bit out loud. I'm concerned if we are giving training, run should not, in my opinion, should not be the first response. If you are in a classroom as a teacher, as whoever is in control of that classroom, you don't want those kids running out of that classroom, because what happens, they could be running into the arms of a shooter. You're also responsible for accounting for all those kids. So run is maybe an approach, but you've got an authority figure, and they should be saying, okay, based on whatever intelligence they're getting from their administrators, these are the steps to go. So I want to make sure that we're, because we had kids saying, I'm jumping out a window.
Right.
No, so.
The teacher is always, that's number one. But this in particular is really important when kids are caught out in the hallway, that there's a lockdown, they can't get into their classroom, then, run to a safe place, hide if you can, and then your last resort is, telling them how they could fight. And it has to be age appropriate, but, and I'll, defer to you, but that is our understanding, is a best practice nationally, is to run away from danger. But the teacher, we don't want the kids making these choices unless they find themselves right in an untenable situation.
Yes, I agree with you, Superintendent, on that. So, but I want to make sure we're training in that way, that I don't want a classroom of teenagers thinking, I'm getting out of here. And the teacher, you know, because then you have chaos, you can't account for kids, and then one of the responses as our staff need to be able to is account for who was in that building so we know, has everybody safely, have we got hostages? I mean, so you need to, so I just want, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, that we need to be educating our kids and our staff on those steps, but run is not the first step. It may be a step depending upon, it may be situational, but I don't want all of our kids to be running or jumping.
And of course, you know, is it safe to say, Mr. Sabridas, that the video and the training for teachers as well as kids would outline when run is the first response and when it's absolutely not? And listen to your teacher if you're in class is the first thing you do. And I mean, that's why this video and how it's crafted for different age groups and everything else, I think would be so pivotal. Yes, sir.
So one thing, President Carrillo, board members, Superintendent Garcia, I would recommend we can add a term. This is a nationally coined term. We can add something into that when we lose in law enforcement. The number one thing we do is assess, right? So we assess first, and then is hide the first option, is run the first option, or is it fight our first option? So we first assess. So like you said, if we're in the most favorable, safe location, we assess this is the best place for us to be. We don't run, we simply hide. So that we can add that into the video, into a component, so everybody understands it's not a natural reaction that we run immediately.
However, I do know that this training has been based on best practices, right? I think there's been a lot of research on the order of operation, but always common sense has to come into play. The other piece is we have to do a good job of educating the public, because as you well know from the forums, we had parents that said, we've told our kids to do X, and I know you've told us not to come to the school, but we're coming to the school. And, you know, and it's that mentality that we're also having to educate the public that you're actually making it less safe for your child or endangering the safety of others. So this is also going to require a good campaign. Maybe we create another video for the PTAs, right, or for parents to be able to watch and understand why you shouldn't go to the school when there is an event, why you shouldn't tell your kids to jump out the window or run or not listen to the adults, because we did hear a lot of that.
Well, they won't be able to jump out the window because it's going to have that plastic film over it. They can't jump out, right? So, and then remember when we used to have, in case of emergency, break glass? You see that some? Do they have those anymore? Well, maybe there needs to be a big in case of emergency break glass, and in that case is our own rifle in every classroom, and we train every child as a shooter. What do you think? NRA would love that.
I think that
And I know
comment,
you think I'm making light, but I
think that comment is uncalled for.
Well,
so
just all this, you know, I am who I am. I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's my turn.
It's your turn.
So, okay. The other thing, and I'm glad you talked about bulletproof versus bullet resistance. Again, at the law conference, it was a great conference, a lot of safety. One of the things that they mentioned to school districts, if you were thinking about going that route, that it might shatter the window, but it's still, the glass wouldn't fall away. But they said probably your weakest point in your door system is not the window, but the wooden frames. Many schools have not state-of-the-art doors, so your frame is going to fall away. And so then they also talked about narrowing the opening so it was maybe no more than 12 inches, because it would be very hard for somebody to get into that classroom. So instead of now, so maybe for when we're looking at designing new schools like Milagro, we're in the middle, but they said to have big plate glass windows is probably not maybe something we want to do in light of security now. We might want to have blocks of glass to bring in the natural daylight, but have smaller openings. So that was another thing. And I do like the idea of this audible, visible alarm. I think that's a great thing after we investigated a little bit more. The other thing that, one of the things that they brought up, which I thought, and it was very fortunate for one of our superintendents, when they did have a shooting on one of their campuses, they were not there. They were not there. They were coming in the morning, and they said the superintendent was able to respond because within their vehicle they had a mobile command center. So they were able to respond. So that might be something that we need to think about, is should the superintendent's car be equipped, which would be expensive, but with a mobile command center, so they could.
Now, I'll tell you one thing, though, that we have in place that I think is pretty amazing, and that is, I think, we saw this really, and I don't want to disparage any other district, and I don't want to disparage any schools, but I'll tell you that when they had the was it shelter in place at Milagro? The way we managed it and the way other entities managed it was night and day. And it has a lot to do with how we communicate. And whether it's 6 in the morning, and we've done this at 5 in the morning, we've done it at midnight, our way of communicating and how we manage certain events, we're pretty good at this. And I think I don't necessarily have to be the one at the command center. There are other staff that can be at the command center, but the real issue is how are we communicating and working with law enforcement. And we've developed a very good rapport in terms of how we collaborate, but it's certainly something, obviously we could look at, but I don't know that we're as dependent on just me or one person, and how we work on this as a team, and all of us understanding what it is that we need to do in certain events. I'm proud of the staff is their responsiveness, because we've handled situations when no one is in the building because it's so early in the morning, no one's even here, and we're able to manage it.
And I would say, Superintendent, I think that's the right answer, because, they did talk a lot about who is the incident commander. And so I'm glad to hear that our staff is well-trained. So, the first one that gets the call, it controls the incident until whoever next comes in, until you get, and then, of course, they talked about when law enforcement, they're the incident commander. So I think that's a great idea. I did also like the cards for the red and the green cards that could be slipped out through the door, because I think that's really important when the first responders are coming. They need to know where to go first and handle those situations. So I do like that. And also, too, it prevents them from, unfortunately, if we lock down and the person that's trying to cause the harm is in the room that's locked down, somehow that has to be communicated so they don't walk in and we've lost more people's lives. So I like it. I thought overall it was a great presentation. And I'm sure we'll, unfortunately, as more incidents happen, which I'm sure they will, we will get better and better at this. But I think, I remember before we had this presentation and we knew it was coming up, I said to each school board member, think in your heart of hearts, is there anything as a board that you would feel that if we don't do now, we say we let our students and staff down, and you couldn't live with that? I think as a board, we have taken prudent measures to respond to, you know, a tragedy, so I feel comfortable with what we're doing as a district. But if there is a school board member that feels like we need to do this, then I would definitely want to hear from them.
No, I appreciate that, and I thank you for that. And I think our schools are safe. I mean, I've said that before. I think the video is a cool next step. Ms. Noble.
I have maybe a somewhat different take, but I guess, and I appreciate Vice President Cashman teeing that up. I am glad to, and appreciate the superintendent's answer to Secretary Garcia that this is something that needed to be discussed in private, how an incident command works. I'm actually a little bit uncomfortable with us brainstorming the possibilities of what could go wrong or where exactly somebody could do something publicly. I don't feel that there are thousands out there watching, but I think we should be aware of what we say publicly. I appreciate that discipline a great deal, and I think that the rationale, logic, and general approach that has been brought to this is really great, with an emphasis on best practices, with an emphasis on what's going around nationally, because I do not feel that we as individuals on this board are best positioned to necessarily think these things through. There's a lot of good work going on out there, and I think we need to tap into that. This is a big deal, and guns are a gigantic issue right now in schools, and we certainly need to be working on that. There are also other things that could happen, and redundancy around communication ability, and there are a lot of things that went on, you know, having spent a lot of time in New York City just after September 11th, there were a lot of different conversations that went on, and we learned a lot in a lot of different workplaces as a city, where I lived at the time, and, you know, I do think, and there's some clues in this presentation that let me know that there's other thinking going on, and I appreciate that, and the superintendent's emphasis on communications. Again, you know, that if it's a redundant path, that it's not around a single person. You know, redundancy can mean a lot of things through these, but I do hope, you know, because bad people will continue to evolve, as will security measures, and so I I'm very glad for the presentation. I'm very glad to be informed, understand that the training and the dissemination through the system is not easy, but really important, and hope that we will just stay vigilant around all of the possibilities and the things that we need to respond to, not just what just happened, but what could happen, and that we continue to recognize that these things will evolve and that we need to tap into the larger wisdom that's out there and work within our unique system. And I very much appreciate the presentation and the discussion, and I do hope that we are somewhat careful about what we communicate, what we say, because, and I believe it's real important principle in law enforcement that you don't share information because in many scenarios, because in an investigation or certainly in responding it to a situation, having the advantage of the information can make the difference. So thank you.
Ms. Cashman.
And just follow on again, at the school board conference, they hit that point exactly. If you're sharing everything that you're doing, you're also sharing it with potential people that want to do harm. And one of the other things, which I first thought was a great idea, mark out in the classroom where that safe zone is. They said, we would not recommend that you mark out that, because then everybody knows where that safe zone is too. And so they said maybe that is not the best strategy for districts to use. And they also said maybe it's best also if your classrooms are such that you have multiple safe zones. So then, God forbid that somebody shoots through the drywall, you haven't lost all your kids in that safe zone. So just things, but, you know, again, I agree with Board Member Noble. This was a great presentation, and I think Board Member Carrillo was talking about the video, and I'm on board.
She just left, but I'd like to have the four of us agree that, well, do the three of us agree that we'd like to have the Dr. Garcia pursue the video?
Yes.
Okay, we'll just make sure that when Ms. Noble returns, it's just a direction, it's not a vote, it just is what it is, right? And you know what we mean, right? Age appropriate, all that stuff, all the concerns that Maureen gave. So I know sometimes I'm inappropriately sarcastic, but it masks intense anger around this issue, okay? Because something that we have to always address is, before they get to the metal detector, before they pull in, before they do this, before they do all of these things, what's the one thing that all of these people have in common? They've acquired a firearm somehow, somewhere, from the cabinet in the den where the things aren't locked up, right? Or from a gun show that doesn't have any sort of way to track or do buyer's checks right away. That's the thing all of this has in common, and that's the thing that's not being addressed, and that's the thing that drives me effing crazy, because we refuse to address the root cause, okay? And now districts all over the country are going to spend probably together billions of dollars on things that will not make them safer, because the one thing they have in common is somebody goes and acquires the firearm. And I know that there was no stomach to even discuss this at the state school board conference, which was really it's very unfortunate. Now that, since Kate has sat down, are you on board with the video? The three of us said we'd like to direct the superintendent to explore doing the video age appropriate, taking the concerns of Ms. Cashman as a really good, as a productive tool for teachers and students to learn.
And the word is explore.
Well, I come back with a recommendation, explore, yeah, they're not going to do it.
Well, just because I wonder, I mean, are we self-producing the video? There are all these questions. There's resources out there, the guidance around what is age appropriate. Even the best practices are evolving pretty fast around run, hide, fight. And so I'm good with exploring. I do think it merits some investigation, because the devil is in the details, particularly when you're, I don't know, producing television or something that is involving very particular things like images and words.
So explore, are we good on explore? I'd go a little further, but are we good on just explore?
There may already be something out there. I don't know, you know, just like what we saw on the YouTube. So
Yeah.
there's probably multiple things on different ages, you know.
Because the one on YouTube, did you notice there was only one brown kid and he was in the back and in the corner with his head down? It was like in it's like they shot this in North Dakota. But so we would want something that maybe mirrored Santa Fe.
And the mics cut out midway through for the kids, so I don't know what was going on.
I know, okay. The answer, yeah, thank you very much. So are there any other comments or concerns around the presentation? Yes, Ms. Cashman?
And I hear you on your comments on the guns, but if I'm not mistaken, there was a stabbing. So, you know, there's, if people are intent to do harm, it's hard to prevent somebody that has a problem. I think probably one of the big issues is if we can identify kids that are feeling that they don't belong, that they're isolated. To me, that is a really important thing to do, to make them feel somebody cares for them. And we know that our kids have multiple stress, you know, whether it's poverty, whether it's family situations. I mean, it's a stressful environment. Even that constant social media, that they can't put down those phones for a few minutes, their minds are constantly going. And so, you know, we just need to be aware that it's not just guns, it's multiple, but I think a big piece is our kids and our parents and our staff are stressed.
I just wanted to say, Mr. President, that the number one recommendation is always around prevention, behavioral and mental health. And we really appreciate that you have focused on that as well, because whether it's a gun or it's some other act of violence or a stabbing or whatnot, or threatening, usually comes, if we look at all the profiles of these kids who have been involved in these issues, they tend to have been kids who were bullied, who are lone wolves, who have those kinds of issues. What did
Let me
we
just drop
lose?
something. No, you go on.
No, that's all I had to say.
Comments, any others, additionals? So we're good. That was a really excellent presentation. Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is board discussion. Isn't that what we've been doing? Impossible. Ms. Cashman.
I just would like to hope that on our next meeting, Superintendent, CRC voted back in May on the science labs and the tennis courts. I hope that they're going to be
It's on?
coming
Great.
before the,
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Cashman. Anything else right now for board discussion? Rudy, you seem like you're getting ready to say something or sneeze. You don't get to move for adjournment. We're adjourned. Nothing else? We're adjourned.
I do have one.
Oh, thank you.
I have one on
Oh.
advanced planning.
Okay, advanced
Just
planning.
real quickly, the location for summer school graduation is to be determined. We had it in here last year, and it was too
Way too
crowded.
small.
So staff is exploring, right, options.
Maybe the city could float us a freebie this time. Right. But it'd be really nice if they could. Summer school graduation last time, there was no room. It was just, it was crazy. It was great, but it was crazy how busy it was.
but because it is summer school graduation, we have multiple schools that will be graduating. It might be nice not to have it at just one of our main high schools.
No,
You know,
convention center. That's what it's there for.
I agree with the convention center is a good place, if the city will,
We'll call the people that.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. They have to remember why it was built. I mean, everyone here remembers the partnership, right, that was supposed to happen with the public schools when they built that. Were you here then? Well, there you go. All right, we're adjourned.